Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Is this working? Or is this working or is it just my voice? Huh? I don't think it's, hello? Okay, good evening everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. Sagarika, thank you. Neha, thank you for being here. I was reminded by Sagarika that this is her fourth time at the Quorum, so we're very grateful that you keep coming back. I was told by someone that Sagarika firmly stated that she would never join politics. As a fearless journalist and a staunch defender of democracy, she believed that her place was in the newsroom and not in Parliament. But today, that story has changed. In a remarkable shift, Sagarika has crossed over from covering politics to stepping into the very heart of it. Now a member of Parliament with the Trinamool Congress, she says that when journalism is stifled, action becomes imperative, and watching from the sidelines is no longer an option. This evening, she's joined by another bold voice, award-winning independent journalist Neha Dixit. And in conversation, these two powerful women will reflect on truth, courage, and the fight for democratic values. I don't think it's, one needs to make the point that we are living in strange times, and we want to commend you for doing that and making sure that these conversations are had. Saloni Puri, who's a friend of Sagarika's and Neha's and our director for programming, was hoping to be here today to make this introduction, but sadly she's had a little bit of an injury, so she couldn't make it. She's hurt herself. But on her behalf and on behalf of the team, we'd like to welcome both Sagarika and Neha. And without further ado, we look forward to this conversation. But please give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Vivek. Sagarika, again, everything starts with being powerful, right? So we must shake this up a little bit and understand how powerful we are and how powerful you are for us. But I just want to say, we know this Sagarika, who was a reporter and then an editor, then having lots of fantastic conversations on TV at a time when they weren't so popular, but you asked difficult questions, to being a writer of many fiction and non-fiction books, and now in the Parliament. And I also want to add that even behind this powerful person, every once in a while one has heard stories of how she's quietly lent her support to a lot of young reporters, and particularly, let me say, young women reporters. At least I, in the last 18 years, have heard those stories. So Sagarika, please tell me, before we get into this current Sagarika, who is this powerful person, and we have a lot of expectations from you, what was that 8-year-old Sagarika like, and what actually was built the foundation that took you to all these roles and here, wherever you are right now, and the worldview you have for everybody, for democracy?
Thanks a ton, Neha. Thanks a ton, Neha. I am a very big admirer of your work, and it's wonderful to be here in conversation. Vivek, thank you so much. Always great to be at Quorum. Thanks everyone for coming. I think I would begin probably by saying that I was born into a family that prized academics and prized learning. My grandmother used to be a freedom fighter, and she was a very powerful woman, and she always said in Bengali, I'll say it in Bengali, I don't know if anyone here follows, I know that Poroma does, যে অন্যায় করে সে খারাপ, যে অন্যায় সহ্য করে সে আরো খারাপ. That is, those who do wrong are bad, but those who tolerate wrong are worse. And but then I would also like to pay tribute to my mother and to generations of women before me, like my aunts, who lived hidden, invisible lives. Perhaps they never came out into the open, but they created little quiet templates of freedom for all of us. My mother's love of books and poetry, and she passed on to me this magical world of letter, the world of the written word, and almost as if suggesting, keep this world close, because this is a world that will give you freedom. And it was never said openly, it was never stated overtly, but by pushing me towards reading and towards poetry and towards learning and towards reading books, and I was a voracious reader, this whole world of adventure and endeavor and effort opened up for me, and I remain very grateful to my mother for that access to that world. Two other women in my life, I think, who in many ways exemplified quiet determination for a little bit of freedom here, a little bit of freedom there. My aunt who became a diplomat, another aunt who became a lawyer, who remained within the confines of tradition. And I think we all have these women who in our lives, who within the confines of tradition staged little mutinies and little rebellions that made life easier for all of us. And these little rebellions and little mutinies and these 1,000 subversive acts that they did, without anyone noticing really, or without anyone perhaps even registering that these were little rebellions, perhaps even a cut of the hair, perhaps even a style of clothing, perhaps even a way of laughing, perhaps music, perhaps dancing. In small little ways, I think that women in the generation of the 60s and 70s created templates of freedom. And I really would like to pay tribute to all the women in my life who certainly helped in creating enclaves of freedom so that I can be what I am today. And I hope I can be that for other young women and for my daughter. So,
but were you like a naughty child?
Yes, I was a tomboy.
Troubling all these women who were...
Yes, I mean, my dadi was actually a tomboy herself, and so was I, and I was extremely rebellious and extremely contrarian, and I always said the wrong things, and I was never very good at putting a right face on or putting the right kind of appearance on. I'm still not very good at putting on makeup and things, like when I put on, once I remember going into office with makeup, and a colleague looked at me and said, do you have fever or something? You look so blotchy, and so because I'm really not good at the perfect female face and the perfectly made up beautiful face. I can't do that at all. So I really am. I think I am just what you see is what you get, and so I was always in all my pictures, and I look at my baby pictures and I see a lot of kids looking very pretty and angelic, and there's me looking either angry or sad or confused or bewildered. And so I think I did grow up to be a bit of a contrarian, with lots of very powerful women in my life to whom I would like to pay tribute.
So I want to ask, were all these mutinies, these rebellions, were they feeding your reporting? Because she did these fantastic reports going to some training, Rashtriya Sevika Samiti camp, I still remember your report, and many others.
I went to an RSS house school.
How were they feeding your reporting, and give us like some 2 or 3 memorable experiences, and those experiences that made you think that maybe this is not enough and maybe one day I'll be a politician?
Well, I didn't think I'd ever be a politician, but I loved reporting, but my first initiation into reporting was when I came back from Oxford, and that was in 1991, and I joined the Times of India. There was me and another male reporter who joined at the same time, and there was Yogendra Bali, the very venerable chief reporter, and we joined under him, and so there was me, there was a male reporter. I won't name him because poor man will be embarrassed, and Yogendra Bali looked at him and said, so, you go and cover a rally which is happening at the Jantar Mantar. You quickly go there, and I want to see what kind of report you make. I want to see your reporting skills. Go and cover a rally in Jantar Mantar and bring back your report. And he looked at me and said, and you go to the library. So I said, oh, I should go to the library. He said, yeah, you go to the library. It's because, you know, outside is very hot. So you go to the library and you sit in the library and you read. So I said, oh, okay. I mean, that's very nice. I mean, on first day, he's telling me to go to the library and read. I thought that was very considerate of him. Anyway, the next day, we come back, and again he turns to the male reporter and said, have you got your report? And let me see it and let me know this is right. And then I said, but, you know, yesterday I went to the library. He said, yeah, you go to the library. You again go to the library. I was like, why should I keep going to the library? I don't want to go to the library. I want to go where he's going, to the Jantar Mantar and cover the rally. And so he looked at me and said, oh, you also want to go? So I said, yeah, I also want to go. So, you know, I think from the beginning, I developed a reputation for being a little pushy. You have to be, you see, you have to be a little eccentric. Because if you're 5 foot nothing and in a sort of shabby dress, you'll get walked all over. So you have to be a little mad. You know, like women politicians, I always feel are a little mad. They're a little eccentric. You have to be a little off. You know what I call a kind of designer madness. You cultivate a certain designer madness so that people are a little scared of you and think, oh, yaar, iske saath zara wo mat karo, ye kuch bhi kar sakti hai. So in that sense, you assert yourself, you know. So then I developed this reputation of being unpredictable and, you know, wanting to do things. And so then after that, he sent me on assignments, and I got to do assignments. So it was, and then I ended up actually having extremely good male bosses. You know, I had Dilip Padgaonkar, who was the editor of the Times of India, wonderful man, who used to always ask me, you know, I hope you're reading. Journalism is not the end of the world. You must read, and you must do literature, and you must think about the real issues and the big important ideas of the day. So he was a really good boss. And then I had Vinod Mehta, who was the founder, editor of Outlook, and I joined Outlook in 1995. And Vinod Mehta really, I think, was my mentor. He was my guru. He never took himself seriously at all. And he used to come up to the reporter's room and keep asking us, who's got a defamation case? Who's got a defamation case? Nobody's got a defamation case. What kind of reporting are you doing? And then and when I was in Outlook, I actually had my second child, which is my daughter. And Vinod said, why don't you go to the Mussoorie Academy, you know, the IAS Academy in Mussoorie, where the old ICS officers, you know, the ICS officers, the British ICS officers, were coming for a reunion. This was 1996 or 97. So there were these old, very senior, you know, they were all in the 80s and 90s. They were coming for a reunion to the IAS Academy in Mussoorie. You go and do a story on them because, you know, your father was in the IAS and you have a civil service background. You go and do a story on them. So I said, but how can I go to Mussoorie? I have a kid. My daughter is very, very young. So he said, take the kid. Take the kid and, you know, just go. So there was me, my maid, and my kid talking to these very venerable old British ICS officers, and there was this Indian woman with her kid taking notes while these, you know, very crusty old British officers were sort of sitting around giving their views. It was a very interesting experience. So he was one editor who really didn't have a problem with a woman who had a child, who was a young mother, who was, you know, not, who was not working, was not sort of single, etc. He had no problem with who or what I was. So he was completely egalitarian in that way. And I learned a lot from Vinod Mehta. I really learned a lot. And
I have a question, which is what you're talking about is basically, you know, initially, like you said, there has been a lot of sexism. We've heard from other women journalists also that they were told to cover flower shows and baby shows and not really said that. And like you're saying that here in Outlook, you were treated as an equal person, right? Yes. So that brings me to this question, which we've heard a lot about women parliamentarians. Or, for example, we've heard these stories about how, you know, when Mayawati used to go to the parliament, she was told to wear better perfume because she used to oil her hair and stuff like that. Or, you know, there are various things about caste, class, sort of intersections that exist within the parliament, apart from being told by male parliamentarians that ye parkati aurte fir se aage.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us, give us that insider information about
Yes.
what really happens inside the parliament and what are the kind of intersections or conflicts that you sort of face.
So that's an excellent question, but before that I'll give you one anecdote from my reporting days which kind of brought me very face to face with my own sort of prejudices and limitations. So I was sent in 2001 to cover the areas where the freedom struggle had taken place, and I went to Betia in Bihar, and to get, which is Champaran, and to get to Betia you had to drive 6 hours from Patna. And from Patna to Betia was about 6 hours, and the roads in those days in Bihar were really, really bad, and there was no light, and it was completely dark. So we set off around in the afternoon, but because the roads were so bad, our progress was very slow, and by the time we were, not even close to Betia, it was dark. And so we were going on this terrible road towards Betia. And the driver was there, and there was a photographer, and there was me. And suddenly the driver said, "Madam, पीछे कोई आ रहे हैं." So I said, "पीछे कौन आ रहे हैं? पीछे कौन आ रहे हैं?" So we turned around, and I found that there were these 3 men on horseback with their heads, with their faces muffled, and they were on horseback, and they were riding towards us. I was like, okay, so this is death. This is death. They are coming to kill me. The car will be stopped, it will be torched, it will be set on fire, and I will be left. There were no mobile phones in those days, and that, this is the end of my life. And they were coming closer, and they was coming closer and closer, and the cameraman, the cameraman was like, "Madam, aap utar jao. आप उतर के उनके साथ बात करो." I was like, why will you not get down and speak to them? Anyway, so they were coming closer and closer and closer, and we were literally petrified. We were literally, I was so scared, and I remember that fear till today, because my feet and hands were all cold, and they just came alongside us, and we then stopped the car, and they came alongside us. And they were nobody. They were just farmers out on a horseback ride at night. And here I was, having these visions of rape and torture and killing and murder. And there were just these guys out for a horseback ride at night. And they said, Ram Ramji, sab theek hai? I was like, yes, sab theek hai. Bye-bye. So it was, and I thought to myself that here was my sort of very city-bred notion of what what the rural India was like, and bandits, and there I was in danger, and I was in terrible peril from these masked men on horseback. It was nothing. It was just ordinary. It was just a slice of life. It was ordinary slice of life. And since then, I have never felt safer than I do when I'm out with reporting. In across India, in rural areas, etc. But coming to Parliament and to women.
And how was your first day like? Tell us.
So Parliament is very, very interesting. It's thrilling. It's a very scintillating kind of experience, exhilarating sort of experience, because it's a very structured thing. Everybody operates like a chessboard. So the rock star of Parliament is the whip, is the chief whip, and the whip takes on the chair. The whip is the leader of the party, and you had the legendary whips of yore, Madhav Rao Scindia and Digvijay Singh. They were the great whips of the Congress party. So the whip actually handles the party. Then you have the party leader who sits in front, and then you have the rest of the party. So how it works is, if somebody is a good speaker, or if somebody is being fielded as a speaker, they will be fielded with somebody from the opposite side. So if, for example, Amit Shah is coming to the House, the Congress will then field Jairam Ramesh to speak exactly at the same time as when Amit Shah enters the House. Also, when somebody else who's say Modi is coming into the House, he never comes to Parliament, by the way. Even when he comes, he's like sort of Caesar, with his 2 shawls, and even in the height of summer, he's wearing 2. I'm like, why is he wearing 2 shawls in the height of summer? Why not 1 shawl? With a 1 shawl here and another shawl here. Anyway, so Yeah, I mean, 2 shawls in the height of summer, even in that parliament, air conditioned is quite a feat. And he doesn't even sweat, so I don't know how he does it. But anyway, so when, for example, Modi is coming in, then the opposition will feel a good speaker. So there are very good speakers from the DMK and the left. So they're very good speakers, and so they will be fielded. And then somebody else comes in, then I will be fielded. So it's like a chessboard. It's very structured. None of it is spontaneous. It's very structured. You have to give your name in first, and then you're called on to speak. So we have, Parliament starts at 11. So 11 to 12 is 0 hour. So 0 hour is when you stand up and raise any issue in the public interest. So you can stand up and say, roads are being flooded, and what is the government doing, and and COVID cases are rising, and what is the government going to do when COVID cases are rising? And then somebody in the BJP will stand up and say, we must rename Aurangzeb Road, and and we must rename X Road, and why do we still think that Rana Pratap did not defeat Shivaji in this particular battle? And anyway, so that kind of, so all that goes on in 0 hour. And then there's question hour. So 11 to 12 is 0 hour, 12 to 1 is question hour. Question hour is very interesting because if you ask, because we all have to give in questions before, and if your question is a starred question, then a minister has to stand up and answer. And if the minister answers, then you have to, and you can then ask supplementary questions. And so if you have a starred question, then the minister has to answer. So I had this really funny experience. I had a starred question on pensions for armed forces personnel. And increasingly, disability pensions for armed forces personnel is very difficult to establish because they don't give disability pensions to armed forces personnel because they say, oh, no, you are suffering from alcohol abuse and this is something related to lifestyle, we're not going, this is not a disability, so they don't give disability pensions to armed forces personnel. So it's a very contentious issue. And so I asked the question and the minister had a prepared answer and he gave a prepared answer. And then I had a supplementary question, which is, the increasingly disability pensions are for the armed forces personnel. You have to approach them through the Sparsh portal. There's a Sparsh portal through which they get these disability pensions, and these are full of glitches. So my question was, what are you doing to make the armed forces portal, the Sparsh portal, glitch free? And the minister had no idea. So he just stand up and said, Modi ji ki jai. I said, what? What? And he kept saying, Jai Shri Ram, and Modi ji ki jai. And I kept saying, but what about the glitches in the Sparsh portal? And how are you going to fix these glitches? And so he just went off sloganeering on various sloganeering. And the thing is that it was all captured on camera. It's live streamed, right? And so this caused a huge controversy because everybody saw that the minister was unprepared and all he was doing was sloganeering. So this was one of the experiences I had. And then we had, of course, I had another starred question on the NEET examination, which was also interesting. But there, the minister does come prepared. The education minister is actually quite good, and he does come quite prepared. The education minister and the environment minister in this government, I would say, are very well prepared, and they come well prepared for questions. Some of the others are hilarious, to say the least. And, yeah.
So, like Vivek said, and everybody keeps, repeating this, that you were opposed to joining politics, or you critiqued that and you joined. So, first question is, why did you decide to join politics? And number two, I don't know if people remember, there was this famous 2013 interview of Sagarika's with Mamata Banerjee, where she asked some hard questions and she stormed off midway, and now you're in that party.
Yes.
So why did you join Trinamool Congress? So these are my two questions.
Well, I have to say say for Mamata Banerjee that although she stormed off that interview, she then never lost touch with me. She kept on being in touch with me. She took all my questions. She gave me lots of interviews. I think her heart broke at that time. You know, she flared up and walked out, but I think she thought, I wish I hadn't done that. And I think since then, we actually formed quite a bond. So I always say the difference between Mamata Banerjee and Narendra Modi, Mamata Banerjee walked out of my show in 2012 and in 2024 offered me a Rajya Sabha seat. Mr. Modi walked out of Karan Thapar's show in 2007 but has not offered Karan Thapar a Rajya Sabha seat. In fact, has ostracized Karan Thapar from his charmed circle of journalists. So I think there's anyone who has really split and destroyed journalists as a community, it is Narendra Modi actually. But to come back to politics and to why I joined, it was getting increasingly difficult, Neha, to do the kind of journalism that we want to do. You know, journalists are we are the gorilla in the room, we're the cockroach in the system. We have to ask the tough questions. It's our job to ask the tough questions. It's not because we're doing it because we hate X or dislike Y, but it's our job as journalists to ask questions. You know, Brazilian journalist once said that we are always anti-establishment. But in today's media, you can't afford to be asking any questions at all. You can't afford to be anti-establishment at all. I mean, today's media is a joke. I mean, we all saw, right, what happened. I mean, we had captured Karachi, we had captured Lahore, we had bombed Karachi port, we had flattened POK. I mean, we were almost capturing Rome. And, you know, we had almost overrun Manhattan, you know. I mean, we were about to capture Saturn, actually. I think, you know, we would have captured Saturn by now. So that's the kind of crazy media that, in fact, there was a joke that, you know, having overrun the world, we are now moving to take over Saturn. So the kind of media that there is at the moment, there is simply no space for questioning, no space for telling truth to power. I always say that, you know, the job of a journalist is not to, I mean, if somebody says, you know, is it raining? And somebody says it's not raining, the job of a journalist is not to say, oh, well, he says it's raining and he says it's not raining, so the middle ground is it might rain. No. The job of a journalist is to look outside and see if it's raining and to tell the truth. So, truth-telling, asking questions of the establishment, asking questions of the government is simply not possible today. And I think our democracy is more threatened than it has ever been. It's even more threatened than it was during Mrs. Gandhi. I've written a biography of Indira Gandhi there, which you're all welcome to take. These are free gifts for you. And one on Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Indira Gandhi was, to my mind, a kind of half-hearted dictator. She declared the emergency for 22 months, she then declared elections, she lost the elections, she resigned and left. Today what we have is really an undeclared emergency which is going on and on and on in many different ways with the complete takeover of many institutions. So it's not possible to do journalism anymore, it's not possible to be a bystander anymore. You have to pick a side, I think. Do you want democracy to succeed? Do you want the constitution to remain? Do you want to keep your freedoms? You know, do you want to be able to eat what you want, write what you want, think what you want, wear what you want, say what you want, watch the kind of movies you want? Because fundamental personal freedoms are under threat. I went to cover the RSS training camp once and they looked at me and said, "Aap is poshak mein hame interview karne ke liye kyun aayi hai? You know, why have you come in this dress?" Because I was in a trousers and pants. So there is a hostility to the modern woman and a hostility to the independent modern woman in the majoritarian movement that we have today, which is fundamentally threatening my identity, threatening all our identities, in fact. And so I felt it was crunch time. I felt I was distancing myself from the media in any case. In 2014, I had effectively been asked to leave from my from the channel I was working in. At that time, 2014, when Mr. Modi came to power, all sort of so-called liberal journalists or journalists who were asking questions or who were not seen to be part of a certain school of thought were all being picked out one by one and asked to leave. And so I was similarly asked to go. Not asked to go, but things happen in a way that you have to leave. And so there was me, there was Ashutosh, Nikhil Wagle, Rajdeep, many of us. We all had to we were just cleaned out. I then joined the Times of India in 2014. I had a good run in Times of India for about 6 years. But then even there I found space lessening and lessening and lessening. And so it came to a point where you couldn't breathe anymore. You just couldn't write anymore, I mean, how much can you keep writing about, my favorite sari or, my favorite dog or, I mean, you just have to, you can only go into things like that. You just can't write about the issues that matter. So, so then I kind of distanced myself more and more from the Times of India. And so when Mamata Banerjee approached me, she had actually asked me before. You see, she never lost touch with me. And I think after she walked out of my show, we developed a kind of an odd bond. That, I have walked out of your show and you've suffered because of me. And somehow it forged a friendship between us. And I have always believed that she is a remarkable woman. She's a remarkable woman. She's a woman who has made it entirely on her own. She's the only politician in India, woman politician in India, without a single male mentor. Mayawati had Kanshiram, Jayalalitha had MGR, Indira Gandhi had Jawaharlal Nehru. She had no one. She had no one and nothing. And she created a startup entirely on her own, has taken it to success and has become a 3-time chief minister and a 7-time member of parliament and a 4-time union minister. So I think she's a remarkable story. So I was attracted to her for that. And so space within journalism was lessening for me. I found that I found that it was important to be in the opposition because if the opposition lives, democracy lives. If there's space in the opposition, there's space for dissent. If there's space to question, there's space for everybody down the line to get freedom. If there's space for the opposition to criticize the government, then everybody down the line has a ripple effect and there is space in society. So I thought to strengthen the opposition is fundamentally important to keep democracy alive.
So the journalist in me wants to ask you this question. Is there any space or what kind of space exists within TMC when there are disagreements, when there is critique? If you could give us some examples of how they are dealt with.
So I think within the TMC is a very, very grassroots level party and located entirely in Bengal and within the milieu of Bengal. So since I'm in Delhi and I'm looking at kind of national issues, there's really no pressure on me at all because there is no sort of TMC is not in Delhi and there's no pressure for me to opt for a certain line. And I think I will say this about Mamata Banerjee, is not only is she herself a woman, but she facilitates other women. She actually loves it if you're a Laraku woman out there. It's not just me. There are so many in the TMC who are out there and who are voicing ourselves. In fact, we're a bit of a force in Parliament, because you have the BJP on one side with all the looking very serious and their dhotis and their topis, and then on the other side you have these very colorful TMC women, who are screaming and arguing and shouting and making our point, and so I think that she has a tremendous. I think she has a tremendous sense of giving women space. Which is there down the line. I mean, within the milieu of Bengal politics, there is certainly the discipline of the party that has to be maintained, but I'm not within that milieu at all. So since I'm distant from it, I don't feel any pressure. Actually, I feel that I've kind of regained my voice. I've regained my voice as an opposition dissenting voice, which I never used to have which I'd lost in journalism. you know, which I really had, which was finished in journalism. So in the opposition, at least, I have that voice again. So I think again, you know, there's a lot of cacophony of voices in the TMC. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of leaders saying a lot of different things at a lot of different times. We're a sort of Shivji ki barat. You know, we are all kinds of varied people, you know, saying all kinds of things, and all of it encompassed by a woman leader who truly has the sort of pulse of the people, I think.
I do have to leave, so I'll ask my last question and then maybe one or two questions from people. You have spoken about forming a coalition of women opposition leaders. How is that coming along? And number two, something that, you know, we were talking about it earlier, that all of us in some way, if we are speaking our mind in the public spaces, we have experienced some kind of trolling, and sometimes, unfortunately, we are defined by as people who are trolled a lot. And I'm sure you hate a lot. I hate it a lot because there's something that you do that invites that trolling. So if you want to touch upon your experiences of that and how, as a person who has more power now, as a parliamentarian, is there something that you would like to do about it?
Absolutely. You know, I kind of really yearn for the days of freedom, say, of a Vajpayee and of a Indira Gandhi, when there was so much more freedom available for parliamentarians, for journalists. I'll tell you this really funny story about Vajpayee, just as an illustration of how free the media was at that time. You know, Vajpayee, as you know, lived all his life. I've written a biography of Vajpayee. He lived all his life with the woman he loved and her husband. They all lived together in the same house. And Vajpayee, sweet guy, very nice. And my husband was most interested in this. Where was he living? Who was he living with? Where was Rajiv? Was like, is he living with her and the husband? I was like, yes. Anyway, so in those days, the press was so free that there was this press conference that was being held, and Vajpayee was then foreign minister, and one journalist stood up and said, Mr. Vajpayee, now forget about this Pakistan and China and all. You please tell us who is Mrs. Kaul? Because Mrs. Kaul was the person he was living with. And Vajpayee thought for a moment and said, Kashmir jaisa mamla hai. Two people at the same time. And I was just thinking, my God, you know, would there be this kind of press conference today, you know? And there's so many stories about, you know, and there was a kind of joy in politics in those days. For example, you know, there was one time when Vajpayee felt very ill, and he was having a stomach ache, and he called All India Institute of Medical Sciences and said, मैं अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी बोल रहा हूँ. And the nurse on the other said, हाँ, मैं हेमा मालिनी बोल रही हूँ, and banged down the phone. And again he called and said, मैं अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी बोल रहा हूँ, and the nurse said, हाँ, आप अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी, तो मैं भी तो हेमा मालिनी हूँ, and banged down the phone. And Vajpayee then told his son-in-law that I keep calling AIMS and saying that I'm ill, and the nurse is saying I'm Hema Malini. So the son-in-law said, but you should be very happy that, you know, they think you're as starry as Hema Malini. So these were all the kind of, you know, very funny, very sort of humorous and very human elements of political life and lives of politicians and the colorful lives of politicians that there were at those times. Today, I think the laser focus of social media and media has constricted behaviors and constricted relationships much more, you know. There are also extremely funny stories about Indira Gandhi, for example. You know, Indira Gandhi, I'll just tell you this one story. She was an expert in saris. She had excellent saris. And she was once on a tour of North Bengal, and she was standing on a jeep, and in those days there was no security, and she was waving to the crowd, and next to her was her intelligence chief, Mr. J.P. Dutt, and she was looking at the crowd, and she said, Mr. Dutt, can you tell me what kind of sari that girl in the crowd is wearing? So Mr. Dutt, being a intelligence officer, had no clue, and he said, Madam, I think it was maybe some silk sari. So she said, "It is not a silk sari, Mr. Dutt, it's a Coimbatore handloom. What kind of intelligence do you gather?" So, these were the kind of funny stories that there are about those leaders of those times, but I think now our behaviors are a lot more restricted. And I think we're kind of backpedaling on freedom and on freedom for women, because when I see the gender relations within Parliament, it's very much the women in their area and the male MPs on one. The spaces for navigation of gender is very, very limited. And it's almost as if we're kind of returning to a time when behavior was much more rigid, much more controlled, people are much more self-conscious, relationships are not that easily established, friendships are not that easily established, you don't know who's going to blast what about you on social media, you don't know what kind of media somebody has access to. I was just telling you the story about, I was standing with a woman politician and another her leader comes to her and says, "I want you to speak on the budget." And another man, politician who was standing next to her, says, "हाँ, ये तो budget पे अच्छी बोलेगी, ये तो रसोई की बहुत जानकारी है इसको." And I felt like saying, why should she speak on the rasoi? I mean, of course she can speak she has to speak on the rasoi because of the price of vegetables, but that's not something that you would say to someone as, it was a very condescending remark. So, behaviors are much more rigid, much more self-conscious, and I think women have tried to form a coalition, we have tried to form a sort of set of relationships with each other, where we navigate spaces. One of the first things we did was actually, agitate for...
Do you went out?
We do. I mean, one of the first things we asked for was actually access to a proper ladies' washroom, because it's not very well established there. So there are issues that women take up, but women are reluctant. There's a kind of the free-spiritedness of the 70s and 80s, of the women who I paid tribute to in the beginning in the silent revolutions they waged. That is gone. That has gone. There's a conformism in the air. There's a neo-traditionalism in the air. There's a lack of questioning in the air. Everyone is busy trying to outdo each other in ritualism and traditionalism and set attitudes, and as if we have to establish our authentic identities all the time, and that there's very little space for the bohemian, for the eccentric, for the Vajpayis, for the Indira Gandhis. Everyone is kind of ironed into a sort of dull uniformity, which is sad. There is a loss, I think, of that eccentric spirit and the spirit of questioning and the spirit of, because a lot of women who have come into politics have come in through their families, so they've come in through in a very traditional route. A lot of the men have come in through a lot of sort of traditional caste and community networks. So Parliament, I find, sadly, is there's not enough of the free-spiritedness that I researched when I was researching Vajpayee and Indira. It is much more of a quieter, more traditional, more passive space. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's less fire, there's less mercurial, there are less mercurial people around. You don't see a Pilu Modi or a George Fernandez or a Minu Masani or the great orators of yore, or the great sort of the great sort of speakers and orators. Very few. There are, but very few. I mean, I guess you have Shashi Tharoor. Yeah. So there's a dampening down of the spirit, and I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of autocratic system we're in at the moment, which is robbing our democracy of joy, of laughter, of life, of freedom. And also that we are backpedaling on freedom for women. We are actually, I think, cycling backwards on liberation and emancipation. You know, I mean, can you imagine even seeing an ad like the Literal ad? Do you remember the Literal ad? You wouldn't see that today. There's too much traditionalism around. That the troll army would be after you. So coming to the troll army again, what your last question. Yes, I mean, I think visible women are trolled in a vicious way in India, a vicious way. You know, if you're a woman, you're trolled. If you're visible, you're really public enemy number one. And I think men get trolled as well, but not in the kind of sort of very personalized, you know, you're body shamed, you're age shamed, you may have not worn something very photogenic, or you're not, looking your best or whatever, but you're really sort of ripped apart in a way, which again reinforces a kind of conformism and traditionalism. There's no space to be an eccentric. There's no space to be you. There's no space for individuality. You're either in one mold or another mold, and you're kind of forced into a kind of deadening uniformity, So this deadening, rigid uniformity that is taking hold, I think is terribly sad, because the joy, in a way, is going out of our lives, and the joy is going out of democracy. Sorry, that's a very dark sort of note to end on. But in a sense that's true, right? It's that the maverick spirit is being extinguished.
But like you said, it is a dark space, but a lot of women have also found, humor in it. For example, each time I'm told that I'm the wife of a Lashkar-e-Toiba leader, I'm like, I'm still the wife, I can't be the leader of Lashkar-e-Toiba or what. So it does, but we have reached a point where we are sort of desensitized or normalized.
We are, somebody called me a swimsuit wearing jihadist who is also plotting to who is plotting for some world communist revolution. I was like, but if I was a jihadist, would I be wearing a swimsuit?
Exactly.
No, I mean, anyway, but it really doesn't work that way. Anyway, so I mean, there was all these labels being thrown around, and all these anti-national gang, this Tukre gang, Khan Market gang, this gang, that gang. So as a result of which, we're all kind of constrained into this very careful space, into this very narrow, careful space, which I think is, it's very sad. It's very sad.
Should we get some questions from the Quorum gang? Yeah.
Mamata Banerjee herself was, or is, as you say, that she is a bohemian. She used to be a free spirit, and I come from Bengal, so but now that's quite the reverse. If you see the teachers' agitation, the Arjikar incident, and so many things are happening in Bengal, and she's completely silent on those things. And if I may say, including yourself, though you're a friend, 11 women MPs at that time said nothing.
We all did. We did.
Yeah.
We did.
But why isn't, she used to be a flag bearer of that.
Yes.
The strident speaking out.
Yes.
So why is she so silent on these things?
That's a very good question, Paroma, but I have to say, she's more sinned against than sinner. Because, whether it was the Arjikar, and I'm not saying it out of any kind of feeling that these are not extremely serious cataclysms, the Arjikar rape incident or the teachers' agitation, the kind of mainstream media attack on us, it is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. Pure lies were told about Arjikar. That it was a gang rape, it was not. That the operation theatre was renovated, it was not. That that her pelvic girdle had been smashed, it had not been. Grisly, lurid mainstream media conspiracies against Mamata Banerjee are par for the course. And it turned out that the Calcutta police has actually arrested the right person. This psychopath who did this. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that security was correct or that there was not a security lapse. Of course there was. Of course there were issues there. But we have enacted an Aparajita bill. We have come up with a new scheme called Rattire Shati for night shift workers. We have installed many more infrastructural improvements in the hospital. So, I think that she and all of us are actually quite, we're quite sort of taken aback by the kind of blowback we get in the mainstream media. Sandesh Khali, it was 2 blocks in one constituency, and all those rape charges were fabricated. They were all fabricated charges. A mass rape in a Bengal village would be a social catastrophe. You know how aware Bengal villages are. Mass rapes of masses of women, this would be a social catastrophe. Nothing of the sort happened. It was a kind of peoply lie which the media did. And even today, I'm told that, isn't Bengal a very dark place where all kinds of dark things are happening? It's not. We've just inaugurated a Jagannath temple. We are leading in women-led MSMEs. We are, 1,000 IT companies are there in Newtown. So there are a lot of things happening in Bengal, but we are, in many ways, I'm not saying that that these issues are not very serious, that yes, the RG Kaur incident was a terrible incident, and there shouldn't be whataboutery, but what happens in UP and Madhya Pradesh, let us not even go there. There has been violence in Murshidabad, but we have evidence that there were a lot of outsiders brought in from Bihar and Odisha to create riots there. So I'm not saying that that these issues don't exist. They do. We're trying. But we are victims, I have to say, Poruma, of a huge mainstream media conspiracy. We are. You see the way women politicians are portrayed. They're always portrayed shrieking and yelling and, and out of control. We're not like that. We spend most of our time doing very, very serious work. None of that is covered. We spend a lot of time working very hard in Parliament. One of our MPs has been terribly caricatured. She's an extremely smart, very articulate person who's in the Lok Sabha, very badly caricatured. So, so we are up against a lot of media stereotyping, unfortunately.
Yeah.
More questions.
Hello?
Why? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if, the personal lives are personal lives. There's nobody else's lookout.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Sagarika. Ashish this side. So I'll just try to limit the question to your, so you are a politician now, but we the kids of 80s and 90s have seen the cohort of journalists and anchors like you. Watching news was something we waited for the entire day.
So don't tell me you watch the news anymore. I keep telling everybody, please switch off the news.
Yeah, so I will be
You
very...
watch Rajdeep at 9, that's it.
So I will be very honest on this. So I will be very...
Rajdeep at 9, switch
No,
everything.
so on this also, समाचार 8:40 को आते थे, news 9 को आती थी, तो अभी तो दिन भर ही news चलती है, why to watch? Yeah. So I would ask you 2 things. One thing is, when you are doing journalism, so would you like to share one incident wherein while you were reporting something or you were saying something on air and you felt that you are not Sagarika and you would want to quit the profession? There is always a moment which comes in life, no, now it's not worth it. Okay, so one thing is this, and second, a related thing is, way back in 80s and 90s, there used to be a very favorite topic of debates, okay, so which used to be, are films the mirror of society or society is the mirror of films? So I would relate to what you just said now, that what's happening in the news industry and the journalism. Is it not that industry is responding to what people want to see? Because I will relate to see when the incident what you mentioned, this Operation Sindoor was asking. So there was one news channel who was reporting very normal facts, okay, ye ho gaya, and there was one news channel you mentioned who was like, this has been captured. But people don't want steady news, people want excitement ki wahan par, matlab usi ko dekhen, and in my household, nahi ye ke wahan dekho, wahan to ye ho gaya. So what I'm just trying to say is entirely the television and the news industry is not to be blamed. It's also the society, what they want to look into it.
I think that's a very good question. That is a very good question. No, when I was a journalist, I never thought of quitting journalism. I really didn't. I loved it. There's nothing like the thrill of going out with a notepad and, writing on, reporting on people. I loved every minute. I never had a sort of situation where I thought I would quit or anything like that. There were moments when I was very scared, like that time in Bihar. I had another incident in Sri Lanka where I was sort of interrogated by a policeman. But I never had a crisis of conscience, because in the time that I did journalism, really it was the golden age of journalism. We did free and fair journalism. We were taking Mr. Manmohan Singh to the cleaner every day, and he was, we were attacking the government day and night. And I think and I remember Mr. Manmohan Singh saying sadly, I think history will judge me better than you people are, So it was a very free and fair time, and I think that was our generation of journalists. What you say is, I think, very important. Do viewers want to watch sensational news? I think giving people news is not what they want to see, it is what they should see. That is my view of journalism, what they should be told. Because you can endlessly feed people on drama and, all kinds of visuals, and maybe people want to watch pornography. Does that mean you have to give them 24/7 pornography all day? So so there's a moral slippery slope there. Journalism, I think, should be what people ought to know, what you should know. Let truth prevail. Not whatever prevails is the truth. Let truth prevail. So truth has to prevail. Satyameva Jayate has to be upheld. But I do think that advertising-driven news, advertising-funded news is doomed. It's over. There are over 400 channels all competing for the same advertising. Advertising depends on TRPs. So you have to race for TRPs. So you have to say, we have taken Rawalpindi, we have flattened Lahore, we have bombed Islamabad, which makes your TRPs shoot up. And the TRPs gives you advertising, which gives you the money. So advertising-driven news is not working. It has failed. I feel that there has to be some of us who are thinking about this, about how to rescue television news. You have to have publicly funded news. You have to have viewers paying more for news. See, you don't pay anything for news, right? You don't pay. It comes to you free. It comes to you free. But it should be subscriber driven. You see, if you pay peanuts, you will get monkeys. If you get peanuts, you will get monkeys. So you have to have some sort of some subscriber-driven news which pays for excellence. You have to pay for it. The BBC is funded by the taxpayer. So there has to be some form of subscriber-driven news by which the viewer demands the truth, and the viewer demands to see. You see, if you're paying, you'll want the truth. If you're just getting it for free, you'll want entertainment. But if you're paying, you'll want the truth, you'll want to see where your money is going, you want to see as a taxpayer where your money is being spent, you will demand journalistic excellence.
This is a quick question. Huh?
What I'm just trying to say is very important. Now, for the first time, it has been established
She has a flight.
doing foolish things, okay?
One last question.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. There has to be, but there has to be a regulator with teeth, with statutory powers. You can't just, there is a regulator, but the regulator doesn't have any teeth.
I have a question.
You do need regulation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
So I'm a journalist. I'm working with Outlook right now, and I've just kind of started my
I was the
career.
founder team, yeah.
I know. So I just recall you mentioned that you worked with Vinod Mehta. So I'm with them now, and at the start of your talk, you spoke about like small rebellions, and you've spoken a lot about how the industry is kind of doomed and there's all these problems with it that I experience kind of firsthand right now. So what I'm trying to ask is, are there any spaces for small rebellions for us reporters within this kind of very constrictive system? Like, what can I do now that I'm here, right?
I love the word small rebellions. I think they create for us what Václav Havel calls a parallel polis, you know, where we all stage little insurgencies in our own lives, and we can create this little polis, which is separate from everything happening around us. Is there space for you to do it in the mainstream media? No. No. But there is a lot of space in the digital platforms, in what Neha does, in what a number of other YouTubers are doing. And they're, you know, in a way they're keeping democracy alive, really, many of them. The YouTubers, the digital outlets, their reach is small. Maybe they don't have a big subscriber base, but they are the small rebellions. I mean, they will continue. I think they're growing in strength. They're growing in strength. Yes, laws are being passed to shut them down. So I think that, you know, I think that's a danger. Laws are being passed to shut them down. But, you know, we will find a way. Technology will find a way. We will find little WhatsApp channels. We will find little groups. I have a book called Why I'm a Liberal and how we can keep liberalism alive, you know. I think this is very important. Being in little groups and spaces where we can talk, where we can be together, where we can exchange ideas, creating little groups and forums, creating groups of like-minded people, marching together with strangers for causes, getting together and talking about things, you know, putting yourself in spaces. You know, don't just argue all the time on the internet with strangers, but put yourself physically in a space which makes you happy and makes you free. And that in itself is a rebellion.
And that's why we have you in the parliament to stop them from stopping us.
Yes. No, you know, one of the speeches I made was, why is it that, you know, they've renamed the Institute of Rural Management, the IRMA, they renamed it the Tribhuvan Das Sahakari University. And one of the things that we had argued was you have to put in the name of Dr. Kurian. Verghese Kurian was the founder of IRMA. You can't not have Dr. Verghese Kurian, at least in some form, in that university. And they said, no, this is completely unacceptable. This entire speech has to be expunged. So, you know, so that's the kind of censorship you're looking at. Simply because he happens to be of a certain, you know, maybe of a background. But the fact is that you have to keep on pushing, keep on mounting the small rebellions. We will succeed. We will. Yes, but you see what our Chief Minister said today. She said, you're going on and on talking about Operation Sindoor. She told Mr. Modi, you're going on and on talking about Operation Sindoor. What have you done to the Sindoor of your own wife?
But on that note, Sagarika, more power to you, and may you never be silenced. And
I can't be. I mean, I'm supposed to leave, but I'm still talking.
and may you always be available to listen to our small grievances and give us hope. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here.